Hello and welcome to the Eclipse Evolution podcast. I'm your host, Savannah Rose Johnson. It's so good to be with you all today, as it is every time we get together. But I think just especially I am just grateful for this space to be myself and to be seen by you all. So just thank you for that and thank you for listening. There's a number of things I wanted to bring to you today. And I think just starting out, like I'm sorry that I haven't made an episode in a minute. My last one with Gabrielle was fantastic. Definitely check it out if you haven't already. She's an amazing person. And since then, I've just been busy with life as it is. I mean, I love all my clients, but also took a little vacation, did some traveling. My dad got married, had family and friends come in to visit. So there's just, July was over before it began. Like, oh my goodness. But also I started to notice kind of what I brought up in my pilot episode, the perfectionism coming back up again. And this pressure I've been putting on myself for why? I don't know. But this pressure I've been putting on myself again, that like I have to talk about certain things, or I shouldn't talk about certain things, or even what's been coming up a lot is like how I physically present in my podcast episode, which is kind of funny considering like majority of my listeners like don't even see the video episodes. I'm sorry, one second, Starlin. No, sir. I have my dog in here, but he's been like incessantly licking his paws lately. Good boy. Just hang out. And I don't know, I just get overstimulated hearing that noise. But anyways, so yeah, it's my physical appearance is something like that. I mean, I think I'm beautiful. Not to like be conceited, but like, I mean, I've worked really hard on my skin and my hair and everything. I mean, don't get me wrong, I still love my clip-in extensions and I still love my false lashes, and like I do love the full glam, but I started to realize it wasn't something I was doing for me at some points, because I felt this pressure to like be in full glam every time I did a podcast episode, because I'm like, that's going to be what gets people to listen to my podcast, is if I like look 10 out of 10 beautiful, etc. And I'm like thinking about it, because I'm not creating what I want to create at that point, and I'm devaluing myself and what I have to share at that point. So I had to be real with myself about that. So that's why I just took a shower and literally just sat down and started talking right now, because I think I needed to do it for myself more than anything, to be like, I don't have to have a full face of makeup. I don't have to have my hair be like full mermaid levels. I mean, I got a decent amount of hair. It's wet right now, but I started this podcast as a way to give back to myself. And it just kind of makes me sad that like I've so quickly deviated from that. I mean, and I don't get me wrong, I love having my guest on my podcast. It's so much fun. But when it comes down to like these solo recordings, I needed to kind of remind myself, like, I'm doing this for myself and I deserve to do it as myself and show up as myself, and that be good enough. So here we are. Because I just want my message to be something that's real and raw and honest. And I mean, because that's why I need this, you know? Because I need this podcast, like, for myself to connect in some ways. Because I haven't always been good at doing that. I'm definitely getting better. I definitely am like the most social I feel like I've ever been in my life. I have an amazing support group and like support system and friends and community, and I'm so grateful for that. Sorry, I have like something on my eye. And at the same time, like, I still haven't been like giving to myself at the full capacity that I could be, by denying myself something like that I just like to do for me. So again, that's why I'm here today, sharing. But also another thing I wanted to reflect upon, and I think I've mentioned this in a couple other episodes, like my recovery process with codependency, which, if those of you who haven't seen that pilot episode or are familiar with codependency, it's kind of nicknamed like a love addiction, or like, which is like different than like a sex addiction, of course, but it's more so like, it's not like a substance is my addiction. It's like people and the influence that people have on me. And so codependency follows the same cycle of addiction. But again, it's not like I'm getting a high from like heroin or like alcohol or something or whatever. But it's like what influences me are people. Like whether that's like me not speaking my truth because I'm afraid of losing someone's love if I'm honest with them, or me valuing other people's inputs more than my own, or me just like not trusting myself, etc. I mean, it's shown up in a lot of ways, but as of last week, I've now been in my recovery process for a year. So hooray, it's kind of hard to believe. It's been a heck of a year, for sure. I mean, overall, I'm really proud of myself for beginning that process and sticking with it. It definitely was like what I needed and what I still need. I'm still working on it for sure. I feel like I'm just now really getting into my recovery. So what I mean by that is like, I feel like the timeline of this past year, my recovery process, like, so I started August 1st of 2022. That's when I went to my first Codependence Anonymous meeting. So similar to AA, like Alcoholics Anonymous. So it's the same kind of 12-step program, but for people with the codependency. And I go to an all women's group, which is helpful. Keep it a safe space. But yeah, so I started that August 1st, and I feel like the first bit, and I've been keeping a journal every time I go to a meeting, which is helpful, but I feel like the first, like August, September, moving into October was like me really learning what codependency is and seeing where it was really showing up for me, and just learning the different patterns, like whether it's like how my control patterns show up, compliance patterns, low self-esteem patterns, denial patterns, avoidance patterns. So to name like the categories, so to speak, and it's different for everyone, but everyone kind of usually falls in one of those categories, or we can cherry pick or however it shows up for you. But yeah, so I was just kind of really learning like what that is. And I first got into Codependence Anonymous, or just my codependent recovery, because of my romantic relationship. Because my partner and I were in couples counseling to kind of work on our adjustment to living together, and some other things that we were needing to work through, like communication and other stuff. And so my personal therapist and then our couples therapist both were like, this is codependency happening. Like, we really see that going on. So I'm like, what is that? So I was just looking it up on Reddit of all places, and found out like what Codependence Anonymous was, and she just hopped into a meeting, and I was like, oh my gosh, finally something that explains what I've been dealing with. And it was like hard to see that in a lot of ways. I was like, bawling my eyes out, like sobbing, like you for the first, I would say, like handful of months in my meetings, I was always crying just because there's so much going on. Like I was seeing myself, I was feeling relief, I was feeling hope because I knew that there's a structure, like in people who were like me. I was also feeling shame for certain things. I was like feeling sadness for myself, like everything. Like there's so much going on. So I'm really, really, really grateful that I found that recovery process, because I don't know where I would be without it. I know where I've been without it, and it wasn't healthy a lot of times, especially in my like romantic relationships. And again, that's kind of what it started, or why I started that process in my committed partnership, because I like love this man so much, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like why, like is this stuff like continuing to happen? So it was like something I wanted to do for both of us, but then it really has become something that I am just doing for myself now, which feels really good to say. So yeah, once I was able to kind of we were able to work some things out in our relationship, like a lot of the pressure lifted and things started to get a lot better, like really quickly. So I was really happy for that. And then the focus turned to my career, and I was able to see how codependency has like bled into so many different things in my life. And so again, like I started the recovery process for my romantic relationship, but then like seeing how codependency was like just poisoning my career. And I don't really mean like my one-on-one appointments with clients. This is back when I was in like the more corporate environment at a private company, and had like worked my way up in the company over a few years and stuff, and really seeing how like me not advocating for myself was leading to like extreme burnout, and how I was just like my higher power, so to speak, like what was really controlling me, like the people that were my addiction, so to speak, like influencing me, were my team, my bosses especially. And that was really painful to see, because once I started to apply my recovery to this context, like my career, there was so much pushback when I started to advocate for a higher wage, or more boundaries around my job description, workload, my status, like my roles, everything. There's a lot of pushback. And I really had to stand my ground and stay focused on my recovery and what I deserve. And then when I got sick after Thanksgiving, it was like my body was like kind of telling me like, girl, wake up and smell the bacon, because it has been cooking and it is burning. Like that bacon is charred. That is charred. So that's like when I started my podcast, kind of, I mean, sort of a little bit down the road, but I had this like awakening basically where I had to kind of take a sabbatical in December to get my health right, but also like scale back on my workload and really see like what was going on with me, and like how much work was contributing to what I was going through. And it became very clear like that it wasn't just like me being sick, it was my body reacting to all the stress that I've been under for a long time. And as soon as I really started to advocate for change and what I needed, and that not really be granted, I just couldn't go on essentially with that place. So that's then like why I quit. or resigned, whatever you want to call it, in January, and stuck around for a little while to train new people. But even then, it was like so hard to keep sustaining boundaries because people kept wanting to pull me back in, or they kept relying on me for too much. And I was trying to just stick around part-time and just focus on my clinical work, but I couldn't even be in that environment. I would just feel so anxious and would need a day to recover just being in that environment. And I just had no respect for the people that I used to work for anymore either, because they were so horrible to me in my resignation meeting. Just awful. It was a traumatizing meeting. I won't really get into that, but it was awful. And I'm really proud of myself for standing my ground and not giving into their manipulation tactics. But I really got to see their true colors. I call it my Wizard of Oz moment, because they went from being these larger than life people that I gave all my power to and held them with this huge authority, believed everything that they said, to really seeing them as these, like, kind of when I saw behind the curtain, like in the Wizard of Oz, really seeing them as these people with tricks and tactics, and who were just looking out for themselves. I mean, as business people do, but the personal enmeshment that had been going on simultaneously through all this had made me blind to all the ways I was being abused and taken advantage of and exploited. And it took me a long time to really even be able to call it for what it was, because I still felt this guilt. I still felt this loyalty to them. And then when I found out this phenomenon called corporate Stockholm syndrome, when I found out that was a thing, I cannot tell you how much I identify with that phenomenon. And it was so clear to me that was my situation. That was the weird, complex trauma that I'd been going through at this workplace. Oops, I bumped my phone camera. So that was really validating. It was hard. It was a huge grief process. And that's when I started my podcast, because I was like, I've got to process what I'm going through somehow. Like, I've got to make meaning out of my life somehow now, because it was such a huge, it was my life. It wasn't just a huge piece. It was my life. And I didn't know who I was without that job in some ways, because I got all my sense of self-worth from that place. My whole community, my whole like chosen family was all in that place, which is another reason why it made it so challenging to leave. And it's so interesting now that I've left, how I only really stay in touch with like maybe 3 people, like these people that I thought were like I held them like family to me, and I would do whatever they said because I cared about them and wanted to, make their life easier at the cost of myself and my sanity. I haven't heard from them hardly at all. So it just blows my mind. It just blows my mind. But yeah, and so that was from like November to, I ended up leaving, really cutting the cord from that place early May. All the while going through a lot of codependent recovery, having to apply it to my family simultaneously with all this. So kind of like late January, early February, March, having like a big kind of, I wouldn't have called it initially a falling out, but like with one of my family members, really like it became clear to me how much of an imbalance there was in the relationship, as far as like me giving more to that relationship than they would give to me, and how this person constantly, like, we would be on the phone and they would just tell me all about their life, and I would give them advice and I'd be there for them, listen to them. And then when it came down to, if we even continue the conversation, a lot of times I'd just be like, okay, bye. And that would be it. There's like nothing that I would really get to share. But if I did get to share my own stuff, it felt very superficial, and I could hear them like doing dishes in the background or walking their dog. So it was like they weren't really present with me in the same way that I was being present for them. And then when they started having relationship problems, I mean, I dropped everything and was there for them, talking with them constantly throughout the day for several days in a row and giving them all this advice and support that they were asking for. And then, like, when push comes to shove, and they're like keeping me all updated on their breakup with their partner, how it was just so obvious that they were in their own codependent cycle and repeating a lot of their own patterns from past relationships. Like, I was just trying to support them and help them see that they deserve better. But everyone's recovery process is their own, and sometimes people don't choose recovery, which is their journey. And then they get back together with their partner, and a week later they're engaged, and then a few months later they're married. And mind you, when they get back together, I told them how I felt. I told them what I thought. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, weren't y'all just in this nasty breakup that was like awful? Weren't you just telling me all this crazy stuff that like they said or did? Or like, where did all that go? Did it just get shoved under the rug? Like, what is happening? It was just like so evident to me that they're just like, it was just hard to watch and hard to be there for them at that point, especially when they started to make it out like I was the bad guy for being honest with them, pointing out the truth that was occurring. And then they just stopped talking to me, and we didn't talk for a while. And there's this concept called like dysfunctional optimism, which is basically like a fancy way of saying sweeping it all under the rug. And I could tell that they were trying to do that at some points by just like acting like nothing happened if we did interact with each other. And that's just, I can't. It goes against my recovery. It goes against my morals when it comes down to being authentic. Like, it's just, I wasn't here for it, because then I still hadn't gotten any acknowledgement of how they treated me and how they like used me up during their whole conflict period and breakup period, and then went against what I said. And when I told them how that made me feel, how it really hurt, like, just no acknowledgement at all, hardly. Like, it was just like, I'm sorry, but like, that was it. Like, I'm sorry for what? Like, there's just nothing. So I'm not trying to like control their life, or like, it is what it is. They make their own choices, but I can't have a person like that, regardless if they're my blood relative or not. I can't have a person like that in my inner circle. So there's a huge grieving period that really also, helped me see that this wasn't an isolated event either. This had been a pattern in our relationship for kind of like as long as I can remember, like me really wanting a relationship with them and really holding them to this high regard, and kind of giving or excusing some of their behavior, and really seeing it for what it was really hard. But I'm glad, because I just did not have the energy to give that person anymore. And of course, it's awkward when we have to see each other, and I can tell they're like salty at me. And I hear through the grapevine, of course, never directly to me, but I hear through the grapevine of our family, like, that they're still mad at me. And I'm like, mad at me for what? I don't know. But anyways, all that to say, it's interesting how like the codependent recovery has just evolved from like one relationship to another circumstance to another relationship, and kind of come full circle back to my romantic relationship now that we're engaged. And being engaged, It brings up a lot. It does. That kind of pressure of like, oh, I'm going to be with this person forever. Um, some people handle that better than others. I know for me, it initially brought up a lot of childhood trauma, where I was like having to face a lot of fears and insecurities. But it ultimately pushed me with my codependent recovery to really hone in on the relationship with myself. And I'm so grateful for that, because like I deserve a loving relationship, and I deserve a marriage with a partner who's an equal partner and who's trustworthy, and I deserve to set boundaries and speak how I feel. And if someone can't show up for me in that way, then that's okay. But also, like, I don't have to make myself small just because I'm afraid of losing someone. So that's something that I'm still kind of working on, is not suppressing how I feel or not taking on someone else's feelings. Like, for example, I sometimes would be afraid to share if I was hurt because I didn't want that person to feel bad. But they're the one that hurt me. Like, what? It sounds crazy, but that's how it was. Like, as a very empathetic, codependent person, like, I just would carry all of it on myself, and I'm just absolutely exhausted at this point. So I'm still working things out, but all that to say, this codependent recovery, I mean, the name of the game is building a healthy relationship with oneself. And I can really say, like, for the first time in my life, that I like truly love myself, which is kind of crazy, but or not crazy, but it's almost sad because I mean I'm 25, I'll be 26 in about a month, but um, I really have stretched my whole definition of what self love is, because at first I just thought it was like superficial, like, oh, I think I'm pretty or I'm cute or I'm successful or whatever. But then, like, I was still struggling with insecurity, or I was still struggling with making the hard choices for myself or doing the hard things, or like holding myself accountable on certain things, and like, or even facing fears and stuff. And now I see, like, it's those things that are truly self-love. It's not like buying myself nice stuff or like doing fun things like all the time. I mean, yes, that stuff is important, and like, yes, self-care is important, but I really see like where my self-love was weak was in doing the hard things for myself and really advocating for how I feel, because I'm a big feeling person. I feel a lot of big things, and I feel very deeply. And then I also give my all to things, which I don't want to change that about myself. I love that about myself, but also knowing that that is so valuable, and how that deserves to be protected, and that I have to be the one to value that. I have to be the one to protect myself and not just give myself away with hopes that I might get something back, but only give if I'm truly receiving, and also allowing myself to receive, because that's a vulnerable thing too. And I really struggled with allowing myself to receive support, because I would feel like a burden, or I'd feel like it would be used against me, or I was just afraid to be seen or take up space. But now I'm so grateful that I'm really working through and letting go of those limiting self beliefs, especially right now, because I really need it. I really need it more than ever. Um, I mean, things are going fairly well in my life right now. I'm really happy with my career, and I'm really happy with my all my fur babies, and like, all the relationships that I have right now. But there are still some things that I'm working through, and still some things that are needing to get worked out in relationships as well. But I feel like I'm really able to hold myself and hold those emotions and not take steps backwards on advocating for myself because I can't tolerate the discomfort, or I can't tolerate the fear of maybe losing someone. It's like I can feel those things, I can feel that discomfort, I can feel that fear, but I don't let it control me anymore. And I'm able to hold myself through it and tolerate it and show myself love as I'm feeling that. And I'm able to actually move through it and feel better and feel stronger and not feel like I'm compromising on my values, or compromising on what I deserve. Yeah. And that's an accomplishment. And even just saying that, like, I laugh a little bit because it's like what I preach to my clients all the time. And I'm like, you deserve the best, and like, you're a queen, or like, you're like amazing, and etc. And it's like, I'm so good at being a cheerleader for other people. But really learning how to do that for myself is helping me also show up better for other people too. But more so, like, I'm really able to I'm trying to think of how to phrase it. I'm just proud of myself because like what I'm doing is not easy. And not to be like cliche where it's like just one day at a time, but truly I cannot attach to a certain outcome. I cannot attach to the future. I mean, of course it's different than having goals, but like especially when it comes down to other people, I have to really surrender to what could happen, not change my standards, but I have to like accept that they may not be able to show up for me in the way that I deserve, or in the way that I communicate to them that I need, or whatever the case may be. And that's them. And, I'm me. And I don't have to do that work for them. I don't have to get on my knees and beg for them to love me in the way that I need them to love me, or respect me, or like tell them not to violate my boundaries. Like, no. No. So all that being said, that's kind of how I really am expanding this definition of self-love. And again, I'm really proud of myself for that and grateful for that. And just thank you to my whole support system and my friends and chosen family, and just everyone who's really been there for me through this process. And thank you for listening and for being here for me in this process as well. And I hope that you're able to learn from my journey and apply it to your own life however you see fit. And yeah, it's special. Life is weird. Life is so weird sometimes, but I'm grateful for it. So with that, I think that's all I have to share about that. So yeah, 1 year codependent recovery. Now that like I've learned really what it is and how it shows up for me, and how to be different, I'm really learning, and I'm really doing the different stuff now. And it feels good. It feels really good. So yeah, if it's a worthwhile investigation for you, I encourage you to check out books, literature, meetings, whatever. And if I can support you in any way, if you have any questions, just let me know. But with that, I think we'll pause here for today and pick up next time. But thank you again for being on this journey with me, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And subscribe, like, whatever, follow if you want to keep up to date or stay connected. But regardless, I appreciate you listening today, and bye for now.